Hello everybody, it is Jack from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. And if you guys are looking for PTC geocodes, including codes for the new Darkness Ablaze set that came out just this Friday, make sure you check out the Potown store, where you can also use the code OmniPoke in all caps to grab an extra discount on your checkout when you make your order. Today I want to have a quick chat about Mismagius and Bellelba Brycen-Man. Obviously, we found out a couple of weeks ago that these cards are going to be banned, but it's an issue that I feel fairly strongly about, and it's taken me a little while to just gather all my thoughts. I've had discussions with 3 or 4 different groups of people, getting some ideas from friends, from other players, from people not playing the game but playing other games in general, sort of ban philosophies in different games. And I just wanted to have a bit more of a comprehensive video than just a quick opinion, looking at some stats and stuff as well. So yeah, this is just going to be a chat about the sort of announcement that was made a couple of weeks ago now. So we're going to talk about the exact thing that's happened, the facts, explain the cards that have been banned, look at the official reasoning from Pokemon, look at how things change based on these 2 cards getting banned, and then probably the longest section will just be my personal thoughts and why I personally don't think the bans were a good idea. So yeah, let's jump straight into it. The facts of the matter are Japan banned Mismagius and Bellelba Brycen-Man. This was right at the end of July. I believe it was the 30th of July, I think, that they made this announcement. It was either the 30th or 31st of July, I'm pretty sure. The next day, within 24 hours, TPCI follow suit and make the same decision to make the bans of Mismagius and Bellelba Brycen-Man in the standard format. Both cards will be banned as of August the 28th. So we still have a couple of weeks with these cards, but in general, these bans are coming basically with rotation. So the 2 cards that have been banned, I'm sure you're all well aware of them at this point, but if you are unaware, Bellelba Brycen-Man is a supporter that came out in Cosmic Eclipse, which discards the top 3 cards from both players' decks. And when you play the card, if you discard 3 of the cards from your hand as you play it, you can also force each player down to 3 benched Pokemon as well. So a pretty strong supporter, obviously, and has seen a lot of success throughout its tenure in Standard. One that may be a little bit more unfamiliar, especially with newer players, maybe this Mismagius with the Mysterious Message ability. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. If you drew any cards in this way, this Pokemon is knocked out. Obviously, this is a stage 1, but there are items in the format, notably Duskstone, that mean you can find Mismagius and evolve it on turn 1, and sort of use a Mysterious Message super early on. So based on that, this was the official reasoning that Pokemon gave. So the details of the changes: 2 cards were banned in the standard format. The reasoning for these changes is below. These card bans were issued in Japan recently. As I mentioned, obviously they were announced about 24 hours before it was announced from TPCI. In an effort to maintain a more global standard format experience, TPCI has also banned these cards. The second bullet point: control decks and mill decks, strategies that discard all the cards from your opponent's deck, have a place in the Pokemon TCG, but when they become too powerful, the play environment becomes less enjoyable. Bellelba and Brycen-Man has been identified as the card that makes these decks highly effective in tournament play. In an effort to reduce the strength of control decks and mill decks, Bellelba and Brycen-Man has been banned. And finally, hand destruction decks can be similarly unenjoyable to play against when they consistently achieve their goal. With the addition of Crobat V in Sword and Shield Darkness Ablaze, there are some hand disruption combos with Mismagius, Duskstone and Reset Stamp that can be achieved more consistently in the first or second turn of the game. In an effort to break up these combos, Mismagius has been banned. There are no major play Pokemon tournaments using the expanded format in the near future, so no cards will be banned from this format yet. Based on recent results, it is clear that there are some issues within the current expanded format environment, but these problems will be addressed in a future update. Tournament results and community feedback will continue to be analysed to maintain a healthy play environment. In particular, the expanded format will be aggressively monitored because there are so many cards and potential combinations available to use. So what changes? Mill and control decks look to lose significant tools already with rotation, obviously primarily being Oranguru from Ultra Prism. That's going to be the biggest hit for these control and mill decks. There are a lot of other things sort of that were used alongside things like Mars, Articuno GX. You know, there's a variety of different things, even cards such as like Acrobike to help mill decks turbo to the bottom of their deck so they can start their Orangaroo loop. All of these are very relevant cards, so already mill and control look to have to sort of change how they're going to be built, basically. It's not going to be the same shell that's been working for the past 2 years because the backbone of the shell, which was Orangaroo, is rotating. So already there's going to be some differences. There are more attacking based mill options in the format right now, and they look to be the best way to play mill come post rotation. We have Palisand from Rebel Clash, which has a sand sink attack that can discard 3 cards for a for 2 colorless energy. Obviously you have twin energy, things like that. So that's one archetype that never really saw play when it was first released, but maybe post rotation something might be unlocked with it. There is also the Toxtricity from the latest set, Darkness Ablaze. I can't remember what the attack's called. I think it's called Risk Taker, where you flip a coin, and if heads you discard the opponent's top 5, if tails you discard your top 5. So yeah, these look to be the ways that are going to be, well, they look to be the faces of these mill decks from now on, as opposed to sort of the Orangaroos, Cincenos, and just a load of Bellelbas to mill your opponent's deck. In general, it looks to be attacking based, which is interesting. The other thing to note is arguably, and this is something that I've seen in a lot of online groups, and I will touch on a lot more later on, but Bellelba and Brycen-Man was arguably a counter to Eternatus VMAX, which has just been released. Like I say, I'll touch on why this is a bit of a contentious topic, and I don't actually agree that it is an Eternatus counter in general, but you could argue that it is, and therefore there is one less Eternatus counter in the format, which is worth noting considering it looks to be potentially a very, very popular archetype coming up for this new set. Some other noteworthy points. These cards are both still legal for the Atlas Pokemon Online Global 2020 tournament, which is taking place this upcoming weekend. So make sure you factor that in your testing. This format, or this tournament, is going to be in the UPR, so Ultra Prism to Darkness Ablaze format. So it's not post-rotation. It's pre-rotation. It's exactly what is on the ladder right now. So make sure you keep that in mind when going into this tournament. The bans will come into effect as of the 28th of August, so you'll also see these cards, as I mentioned, on ladder up until then, because they're still legal until then. Rotation happens on the 28th, rotation will happen online on the 28th, and these bans will also happen online on the 28th. Finally, these cards remain legal in the expanded format, so if you're playing expanded, you will still see these cards, I would imagine. I can't say I'm an expert on the expanded format, but since they have actively stated in their discussion that is not about the expanded format, I don't really feel like I need to know much about expanded to be able to talk about this topic anyway. One other point which I haven't got on here, we haven't heard anything. I don't know whether we would, because only the very specific players playing in the Players' Cup top 16 will have heard, but we haven't heard anything based on whether these cards will be legal for the top 16 of the Players' Cup, which is going to be in the post-rotation format, but because it's the post-rotation format but not before, or is being played, I believe, before the 28th of August, we actually don't know whether these are going to be legal for the top 16 of the Players' Cup, which is also a very, very interesting point, because you would think not, but again, we've had no confirmation of that, so definitely worth remembering. Even if you're one of the 16 people preparing and happen to be watching this video, make sure you keep that in mind. Like I say, this is probably going to be the more contentious part of the video, the more opinionated part. That's all the facts. I'm now going to say how I feel about all the facts in my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me, feel free to agree with me, I don't know. Leave it all down in the comments. I'd love to sort of see what your guys' thoughts are. I know there's some people that are super happy with these bans, especially with Bellelba and Brycen-Man, because they don't like these control and mill archetypes in general. I know there's a lot of people that are very, very upset about these bans. I wouldn't say I'm very, very upset, but in general, I don't think these bans were particularly necessary, and I don't think these bans were particularly necessary right now, I should say. I think these bans potentially could have been implemented a little bit later down the line, but right now I don't think there was any need for them to be banned. But yeah, let's get into breaking down the bans in general. We have the reasoning, so I want to break down the official statement and kind of look at each point they've brought up. I want to talk about the timing, why now, what's caused these bans, and I want to talk about the structure of the ban system, future expectations, as well as how I would like to see the ban system changed in future, because obviously there's a variety of different ways you can think about changes and bans to a card game, and I want to talk about some of my personal feelings about them. So the reasoning for the bans, there were 3 bullet points given, and I feel I'm going to address each of those bullet points in particular. The first was the one about the global standard format. So just to remind you, the bullet point stated that these card bans were issued in Japan recently, and in an effort to maintain a more global standard format experience, TPCI has also banned these cards. A global standard format experience would be fantastic. It would be really, really good, but you can't. We're not going to have a global standard format experience until set releases are aligned with Japan, and that might never ever happen. I highly doubt it will ever happen. There was a lot of articles, especially when Sword and Shield was just about to come out, that it was like if it was ever going to happen, it was the most likely time because of how things were lining up. And I actually agree. I don't think we will ever see global releases with Japan and Western sets. I don't think that's realistic, to be honest. I don't think it'll ever happen, and that's why I don't think a global standard format is a necessarily good argument for banning these cards, because Japan get cards 1 month, 2 months, potentially 3 months before we do, so they're already out of sync. And whilst it's only 1 set now, there used to be 2 sets ahead of us. Now they're only 1 set. Even though they are only 1 set, we've only just got Darkness Ablaze. They already have Legendary Heartbeat, so they're already 1 set ahead of us, and they're going to be getting another set in September, Vivid Volt or Super Volt Tackle, which will translate to our Vivid Voltage set in November. So they're going to be 2 sets ahead of us by the time we get our next set. So this global standard format, whilst is a really, really nice idea, I don't think banning an alignment to the idea of a global standard format is necessarily correct whilst global releases aren't available or aren't accessible. Like I say, I don't think global releases will ever make sense, and I like that we're able to. It wouldn't be fair, say, to have these cards in our standard when Japan doesn't have. So I can see the pros and cons. It wouldn't be fair to have these cards in our standard when Japan doesn't have them in their standard format. For them to then come to our Worlds format and compete in our Worlds tournaments and be playing a different format than they've been playing this whole year. That is something that I can see the argument for why you would therefore ban in alignment with Japan, and that is a fair enough argument. But the thing is, we don't know what would have happened this year. Obviously, we didn't have a Worlds this year, but last year we had a rotation right before Worlds, so everyone was playing the new format anyway. Everyone was playing the same format anyway. No one had tournaments in the Worlds format before, so everyone was on a level playing field. So if you can't, you're still able to have that global standard format experience for Worlds level events, because we had the rotation before Worlds last year anyway, and it was the first event with the new format. So I can see the pros and cons of that argument, and I think it's probably one of the strongest arguments in general. But I also don't think it's necessarily a good argument to say we want to push a global standard format experience when set releases aren't aligned, which may never ever happen. But therefore, if it's never going to happen, I don't think it's fair to then use that as an argument as why you ban these cards. Personally, maybe that is unfair. I don't know. But yeah, secondly, the second bullet point talks about Bellelba and Brycen-Man. saying control and mill decks have a place in the Pokemon TCG, but when they become too powerful, the environment becomes less enjoyable. Bellelba and Brycen-Man has been identified as the card. This is a noteworthy point. Bellelba and Brycen-Man has been identified as the card that makes these decks highly effective in tournament play. In an effort to reduce the strength of control and mill decks, Bellelba and Brycen-Man has been banned. So this is probably where I feel the most strongly. One, mill as we know it looks to be a weaker archetype next format. It looks, as I've said, it looks like we're going to be moving to attacking based mill with things like Palisand and Toxtricity. That doesn't mean for sure there will be random creations that make it through, but in general, with the rotation of Oranguru, mill and control decks are going to look very, very different. So I think it's difficult to. This is where I feel the strongest. Now, again, talk about this momentarily, but I think that's a very important point that they've said that Bellelba and Brycen-Man is the card that makes the decks highly effective, and I disagree almost entirely that that Bellelba and Brycen-Man is the problem card. Whilst Bellelba and Brycen-Man may be the card that people are the most angry about when it's played against them, because you discard your opponent's stuff, they're going to be angry at you getting rid of their stuff. I think the card without a doubt on almost everyone's hit list is Oranguru from Ultra Prism, the resource management Oranguru that puts 3 cards from your discard back into your deck, or put to the bottom of your deck. I don't particularly have any time for anyone that says Bellelba and Brycen-Man is a more problematic card than Oranguru, because I just think it's wrong. I think I think Oranguru is by far the strongest contender for something that breaks a game. It removes a win condition, which is obviously not something that Pokemon have addressed in the past and they don't want to implement. And I don't think them saying Bellelba and Brycen-Man is the card that makes these decks highly effective is fair, because these decks haven't been, like, Mill and Control haven't been good ever since Cosmic Eclipse. Mill and Control have been good ever since Oranguru was printed. Yes, they might be. They might say, oh, they're stronger now, but I'll show you momentarily that they're not stronger now. Actually, they are, in general, actually getting weaker as time goes on. And I don't know. I don't like the fact that they have used the statement Bellelba and Brycen-Man has been identified as the card that makes these decks highly effective. I don't know what identification method they have used to single out Bellelba and Brycen-Man, because that's not. Whilst that's probably one of the more feels bad cards that you would see, I think in general, if Oranguru wasn't in the format, Bellelba and Brycen-Man would have seen nowhere near as much play, so you wouldn't get the feels bad from it, because it just wouldn't see the amount of play that it does. Arguably, because it is not an enjoyable card to play against, maybe that's enough of a reason to ban it, but I don't think Oranguru is a particularly fun card to play against. Like I say, it removes a win condition, it creates like an infinite game loop. It's not a nice, enjoyable environment to play in, and I think, like I say, I disagree almost wholeheartedly that Bellelba and Brycen-Man was the issue in those decks. It was actually Oranguru. Obviously, Oranguru is rotating, which I will talk about in the timing and why, again, I don't think these bans needed to happen. But yeah, that's my beef with the second point. My beef with the third point is, I'm just going to be straight up with this one. They said hand disruption decks can be similarly unenjoyable to play against when they consistently achieve their goal. With the addition of Crobat V and Sword and Shield Darkness Ablaze, there are some hand destruction combos with Mismagius, Duskstone and Reset Stamp that can be achieved more consistently on the first and second turn of the game. In an effort to break up these combos, Mismagius has been banned. So there are 2 points I have here. The first of which, the only card we have to assume that has come out in the new set that boosts these archetypes is Crobat V, because it's the only card that they've mentioned. If there are other cards, fair enough, but Crobat V is the one they've mentioned. Crobat V is a once per turn ability that draws you up to 6 cards. We have the Denean format. So we've already had these kind of effects before, and these kind of effects in format right now. And I don't know what they have seen, but in general, through discussions online, through YouTube videos, through tier lists, through polls, through a variety of different means, personally, I have never seen a Mismagius-based deck hyped for post-rotation format, hyped even for the UPR to DAA format. In fact, it doesn't even matter because it wouldn't be banned in that format. So yeah, hyped for a post-rotation format. I haven't seen any deck that particularly touches on the strength of Mismagius. And so because of that, I don't see how... I don't know what they have seen that the community hasn't, that Crobat V unlocks, but apparently there is something monstrous that Crobat V unlocks that makes Mismagius oppressive enough to ban. So that's my first point. I haven't seen anything, and whilst I don't know every combo in the world, maybe they have found something that is really bad, and the community are just yet to find it, but I haven't seen any hype from any, you know, popular YouTubers, big posts in some of the bigger groups with, you know, 15,000, maybe even 20,000 people, you know. I haven't seen anything of any validity talking about a deck that revolves around Mismagius and hand destruction in the post-rotation format. On top of that, Mismagius has seen little to no standard format play since the supporter change, since Sword and Shield came out. Actually, using the Limitless decklist tracker, I went back and had a look, and the last time Mismagius made a placement in any regional or higher tournament was Costa Rica on the 15th of February, which is over, I guess it's around 6 months ago now. So Mismagius hasn't seen successful play in 6 months. Granted, we haven't had the usual string of tournaments, but we have had 4 Limitless qualifiers which had over 1,000 players in each. We have had the Players' Cup. We have had a variety of different invitationals. We have had a huge amount of locally run tournaments, and whilst I haven't got data on every single locally run tournament, I again also haven't seen anything particularly devastating from Mismagius in some of the tournaments that we don't even have data from, that we don't have whole data from, we only have sort of community created data from. But especially in the big tournaments, ever since Sword and Shield came out and the supporter change was implemented, Mismagius has not seen any successful play. So moving forward with this presentation, I'm kind of writing off the whole Mismagius thing. I don't think Mismagius needed to be banned. The one argument I can see for them banning it is down to reaching a break point of draw cards on your turn. So Dedenne, Crobat, Mismagius itself draws, that you will eventually reach a break point of all of those cards where you can just always, you know, do this hand destruction. And I can understand them wanting to nip that in the bud, but I really do not think that Crobat V led to that break point. Like I say, I think if that was something that had happened, we would have had community discussion, deck lists, videos, polls. There would have been something from the community about it, because the community is you know, fairly large and fairly adventurous when it comes to building decks. There will be people sticking to the standard stuff, of course, but there will be people trying this, that, and the other all the time. And I do not believe that the community on the whole has not come across this Mismagius combo in the post-rotation format that is so good it would have broken the format. So in general, I think the Mismagius ban was a complete mistake personally. I don't think it needed to be banned. I don't think it was a problem card, and whilst it is perhaps an unenjoyable deck to play against when it gets going, in general, the deck hasn't been good for 6 months because of the supporter change, because generally you can't greens on turn 1. Mismagius and greens were very commonly played together. But in general, just not being able to Mismagius on turn 1, not being able to use a supporter on turn 1 reduced the consistency of these decks anyway. And I think overall the Mismagius ban was a mistake, because there is no data in my eyes in the past 6 months that has shown to me that this card is too strong. I can understand, like I say, the the points about it not being fun to play against, I can understand those, of course, but I don't think this mystery deck exists that would have broken the format. So yeah, I don't like the Mismagius ban, and that's why I don't like the Bellelba Brycen-Man, but I'll explain it. Like, I'm a bit more. I feel there is more. I have a more of an argument on my hands for the Mismagius one, whereas I think there are more people that would disagree with my opinions on the Bellelba Brycen-Man one. Maybe disagree about the Mismagius one as well. I don't know, but in general, the Mismagius one, like the rest of the video, is basically going to be talking about Bellelba and Brycen-Man. Because I think it's the more contentious of the two cards. But like I say, I don't think there was reason to ban Mismagius because I don't see a deck that the community has missed, and I don't see any evidence in the past 6 months that has shown it to be too strong. So the strength of Miller control decks, like I say, the rest of this is going to be basically looking at Bellelba and Brycen-Man. I've taken again from Limitless, I have split into archetypes the best decks by points ever since Cosmic Eclipse was released. So we have Ultra Prism to Cosmic Eclipse, Ultra Prism to Sword and Shield, and Ultra Prism to Rebel Clash. Obviously, there were no official tournaments in the Rebel Clash format outside of sort of the Limits qualifiers, but even so, there was still, you know, a fair amount of people playing those. There weren't too many in the Sword and Shield format, but in general, we did have an IC and a couple of regionals, and obviously the Cosmic Eclipse season or format was played to its full extent. So we can see in the Cosmic Eclipse format, Pidgeotto Control by points was the 4th strongest deck, and Florges Dolls, another control style deck, was the 9th strongest deck. Moving on to the Sword and Shield format, we can see Cincino Mill. Cincino comes out, and Cincino Mill kind of takes over as the control/mill style archetype, and actually peaks at number 3. But in general, yes, this peaks at number 3, but look at the strength of Zacian ADP. 1,000 points, 31% of the meta share, compared to a 9% of the meta share. So just to put that into perspective, this number 3 doesn't mean it was means it was the 3rd best deck, but it doesn't it doesn't mean it was like as a very, very strong deck in comparison to the 1st best. Like, Zacian ADP was by far like head and shoulders above every other deck in this format, statistically, and I think just the strength of the deck in general. So yeah, we have Cincino Mill at 3rd. It does go up, and obviously Magcargo Mill begins to sort of get a little bit of legs in the back end of the Limitless qualifiers, and that creeps in at 7th, but again only 129 points. And finally, the Rebel Clash format. Obviously a few less tournaments, so in general the points are distributed a little bit differently and a bit lower, but in general Cincino Control drops to 8th and Cincino Mill drops to 14th. So in general we've gone up a little bit here and then really drops down here. One of the biggest reasons I think was Dragapult's release. Dragapult really kept Control and Mill decks in a really, really tough spot. But in general, the point I'm trying to make is right now we're actually at a low point in the success and win rate of Cincino Mill Control. So in general, this was the peak around the sort of February, March. You can see that Cincino Control and Mill variants both drop pretty significantly down to 2% meta share and not even 1% meta share down here. So why now? This is the thing that confuses me the most. Why are we banning Bellelba and Brycen-Man right now? Is there a potential unseen combo that internal testing has revealed? Potentially. There is obviously going to be some internal testing that goes on at the labs at Pokemon, the people that you know, look at all of these cards. There's obviously going to be some level of internal testing go on, and it makes sense to have the argument that, yeah, there's obviously some level of testing going on, and it makes sense to have the argument that there is some kind of combo that we don't know about. But I think it's fairly unlikely, because I don't think there's much that could have been stronger than Cincino Control was in the Sword and Shield format that could have been made, that could have come out with the Darkness Ablaze set. Especially with the fact that Oranguru is rotating. I don't know what particularly has been released in the new Darkness Ablaze set that makes these so much stronger than it was, whilst it's losing the backbone of the deck. So whilst there is, like I say, potential for an unseen combo, I think it's unlikely that we haven't seen a combo similarly to the whole Mismagius thing. I think it's unlikely that we haven't seen some kind of combo that's disgusting and will break the game. So in general, I don't think it's that. Is it a delayed reaction? Control has been good for a long time. You just saw that it was the third best deck in the Sword and Shield format. So is this a delayed reaction? They thought, wow, this deck was really good. Do we have to do something about this? It was the third best deck. Say they were looking at Limitless's data. It was the third best deck. And obviously there's a lot of people that don't like playing against it. And whilst Zacian was the strongest deck, you know, it's not disruptive. It's not, you know, milling your opponent's cards, that kind of thing. So, but because this is an uninteractive strategy, let's ban Bellelba. I think that's another potentially weak argument, because we've had a whole 3 months without Cincino Control being the dominant force that it was in the Sword and Shield format, and therefore banning now doesn't really make up for the fact that it was strong in that format, because it's now weak. So it's like, you know, it's not just a delayed reaction, it's a very, very delayed reaction that actually makes no changes right now. Like I say, Control looks to be weak. Control and mill decks look to be weaker, so banning it now just feels like it's kicking it while it's down. As I mentioned, Dragapult seems to have gatekept mill and control decks until now, so maybe this is a preemptive sort of, okay, we can see that mill and control were being gatekept by Dragapult, it was keeping them in check, but obviously with Eternatus coming out, Dragapult gets worse, therefore there isn't this natural counter to these mill and control decks, so we need to nip this in the bud before they get strong again. Again, there's argument for that, of course, but with Oranguru rotating, I don't think that's a fair argument. And finally, is this a knee-jerk? That kind of ties into, is this a knee-jerk reaction? You know, Mill was really good. It was being gatekept by Dragapult. It's not going to be gatekept by Dragapult anymore. Let's ban it so it doesn't get too good. In general, I also don't like this argument, because in my opinion, and this is completely opinion-based, I don't think you should knee-jerk react ban stuff, especially on hypothetical formats. Darkness Ablaze hasn't even been out a week. At the time of these bans, Darkness Ablaze wasn't even out. There was still 2 weeks until it had been released. Obviously, Darkness Ablaze hasn't even been out a week. It's been out 4 days at the point of recording this video. And we haven't had, and bearing in mind, Darkness Ablaze has been out, but we still haven't had rotation, so even now, we still don't know what the post-rotation meta is going to look like. And therefore, the post-rotation meta right now, whilst we can theory it, we can think about decks we want to build. Me and Joe are even going to make decks we want to build and profile them. We do not know what this format will be like. It is a hypothetical format, and therefore, in my opinion, you should not ban cards based on a hypothetical format, because you don't know the effect that these cards might have. Yes, Mill could be one of the strongest decks. It could be incredibly oppressive. It could be as strong as Zacian ADP was back when it was first released, having that 31.29% meta share, and that would really, really be unhealthy for the game. But you don't know that. I think it's unlikely. Again, with the loss of Oranguru, I think that's incredibly unlikely, and I'll talk about this later, but that's when you have to look at the way your ban structure is built and why and when you're banning cards. And like I say, I don't think you should ban cards hypothetically with knee-jerk reactions, especially based on formats that have not even been legal yet, because you don't know how the format will play out, especially in a game like Pokemon where cards only stay in rotation for 2 to 3 years. That's always been their design philosophy. Cards only stay in the format for 2 to 3 years, so we don't like banning in Standard, because, you know, eventually stuff will rotate out in a quote-unquote short period of time. So, you know, I don't think this ties in with their design philosophy of, or their banning philosophy of, we don't like banning in standard because stuff in general changes over time. Yes, I get that you want to make a change now, but I don't think this was the right time, and I don't think the evidence is there to support a ban from a delayed reaction standpoint, because in general mill and control have got worse, and I don't think the evidence is there from a knee-jerk reaction standpoint in that mill looks really, really strong because it loses the backbone, which is Oranguru, and therefore I think, like I say, both sides of the argument aren't particularly fair on why you should ban the card. The timing of the bans is really, really interesting. Obviously, Bellelba and Brycen-Man was a one-card, quote-unquote, tech for the Eternatus matchup. A lot of people thought that you could play a Bellelba and Brycen-Man for the Eternatus matchup, force them to get rid of a load of their bench Pokemon. The Eternatus states that if you have the Eternatus VMAX, if it's in play, you can have 8 Pokemon on your bench, and obviously it does more damage based on the amount of Pokemon on your bench as well. So people thought if you play Bellelba and Brycen-Man, you can just play one of those, use it against the Eternatus matchup, make them discard a load of Pokemon, and obviously that's going to be really, really good for the matchup. Well, this is like a multi-layered problem. First off, I don't think they banned Bellelba and Brycen-Man because of Eternatus. I see a lot of people saying, oh, they just want to boost Eternatus' win rate. They just want to make people go out and buy the new packs to get Eternatus because it's going to be really good. They want to make it even stronger. They want people to be going out and buying the cards. So let's ban the one card easy tech for the Eternatus matchup. I disagree. I don't think that Bellelba and Brycen-Man was banned because of the Eternatus matchup. For 2 reasons. Well, no. I don't think it was in general. I don't think it was. I don't think it wasn't banned for the right reason. I think that it was banned for a different reason, and it just happens to have also not been banned for the Eternatus matchup. You can, like I say, you have the argument that banning Bellelba and Brycen-Man boosts Eternatus' win rate. If this is the case, obviously that's really, really bad, because you shouldn't ban a card to sell your product, because I feel like you should treat your community with more respect than that. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think you should treat the community with more respect than that. But again, like I say, I don't think this is why Eternatus, why Bellelba and Brycen-Man was banned. If it was, I think that's really, really dodgy, and I would be very, very upset if I found that was the reason, but I don't think it is. If it is the reason, 1, I would be really upset, but 2, I would also be really, really upset for another reason, because in our early testing, testing with Joe, testing with a few of our other friends, we've actually found that Bellelba and Brycen-Man was not a very good tech for the Eternatus matchup, simply because Eternatus plays 4 Crobat V, and they are able to draw out and fill their bench up, again, pretty consistently after you've Bellelba and Brycen-Man them, as long as they have access to at least 1 more Crobat. It's going to be very rare they have all 4 Crobat down before you Bellelba and Brycen-Man them. Maybe you wait until they do have all 4 to then use it. That's fair enough, but I think in general it's going to be unlikely, because they're going to have things like Zigzagoon, Hooper, other Eternatus. So, you know, we've found that 1, it's fairly easy to draw out of it because they play 4 Crobat anyway. So it kind of needs to be paired with a Stamp at the same time. 2, you kind of need to also be knocking out the Eternatus as you use the Bellelba and Brycen-Man, because otherwise they're doing 120 guaranteed at least anyway, because they still have 3 Pokemon on their bench. So you're actually only reducing the damage to 120, which is still a pretty significant number, especially when they can draw back up and it doesn't really change anything. So you have to for Bellelba and Brycen-Man to be a good tech, you have to basically Stamp Bellelba and Brycen-Man and knock out an Eternatus VMAX all in 1 turn, and then it becomes a pretty good card for the Eternatus matchup. And whilst that is definitely possible, and you can lean into that kind of play, it's by no means consistent, and it's by no means I can just put a Bellelba and Brycen-Man in my deck and win the Eternatus matchup style tech that some techs are, some techs aren't. But So yeah, in our early testing, that was what we found from Bellelba and Brycen-Man. We actually ended up cutting Bellelba and Brycen-Man from almost all of our lists that needed an Eternatus counter, just for more consistency. So yeah, that therefore shows that, again, if Bellelba and Brycen-Man was banned because of Eternatus, one, that shows, I think, kind of is pretty unfair to the community, because you're banning a card to push your new poster boy card, and whilst obviously they want to make money, people are going to be buying Eternatus whether Bellelba and Brycen-Man is in format or not. But two, it would show a knee-jerk reaction, because we haven't seen the strength of Eternatus yet, and whilst it looks very strong, we don't know that it's going to be strong. But also, it shows a lack of testing for Bellelba and Brycen-Man against the Eternatus VMAX matchup, because, like I say, it didn't take us long to realise that Bellelba and Brycen-Man wasn't a very strong tech for the Eternatus matchup. So it would show a knee-jerk reaction, it would show a really, really sad view of that Pokemon has of their community, and that they would rather sell their product than have a healthy game, so they're just going to ban Bellelba and Brycen-Man. And it would also show a lack of good internal testing, in my opinion, because it's not a one-card tech. In my opinion, obviously it may turn out that it would have been amazing and everyone played one just to beat Eternatus, but in our early testing, and me and Joe have played a fair amount of games of this format, Bellelba and Brycen-Man was not particularly strong. As I've stated multiple times, I do not think this is the reason that Bellelba and Brycen-Man was banned, but I wanted to address this issue because I know there are a lot of people that have said, oh, Pokemon are just banning this card to push their new product, get people to buy their new Eternatus VMAX card, the new set, to try and pull Eternatus VMAX. I don't think that is the case at all. I think Pokemon respect the community a lot more than that, and I think that but I do think that if that is the reason, then that is a bigger problem than people realise. It's not just a case of them banning a card to boost us, to boost sales, to boost a dex win rate, to boost sales. It's actually way more layered than that, because it actually shows that they hadn't fully tested whether this tech was good, because, like I say, I don't think it was. Finally, onto the principle of banning cards. I've realised this is a 40-minute video, so I'm really trying to wrap it up kind of quickly now. But yeah, the principle of banning cards. Pokemon have strayed away from banning cards in Standard in the past. Like I say, their philosophy was always, we don't like to ban in Standard because the format rotates every year anyway. So in general, stuff moves around fairly frequently, and therefore we don't particularly want to necessarily change things more than they naturally change anyway. Having a rotation every year is more than some games anyway, but also cards only staying in format for 2 to 3 years means that in general the format is quite, or the length of time that cards are in the format is quite small and quite short. So that's why they've strayed away from banning in the past. So that's just something that they have said. There's no tournaments in the imminent future that we know about. One interesting thing that has come out ever since is that the Players' Cup rewards were released a few days ago. And interestingly, the Players' Cup rewards are tagged with Summer Cup 2020. Whether that indicates that there will be an Autumn, Winter, Spring Cup, I don't know. But in general, maybe we do. Maybe this is another sign to show that we maybe have more tournaments coming soon. But there's nothing on the horizon, and in general, I don't think being able to... I don't think you needed to ban these cards right now, especially with no tournaments on the horizon, if it's from a tournament standpoint. Especially as we're, like I say in the final bullet point, you're banning on hypothetical data rather than factual statistical data, because we don't know what this format would have been. We don't know how strong Bellelba and Brycen-Man would have been in the format. So I don't like the fact that they have banned without at least letting the format sort of develop, evolve, and see what would have happened. The true reason I think they banned the cards is pretty close to what they said about them being unfun, not very fun to play against, being unenjoyable to play against. I think that's true. I think in general they banned the cards because there's going to be a lot more people looking to play the online game, and if it's newer people thinking, oh, I'll get into the online game because I can't go to real tournaments right now, and they start going on ladder and they're against these control and mill decks, obviously that's not going to be a nice experience, and they want to make the new player experience as enjoyable as possible. I agree with that wholeheartedly, and if that's the reason they've banned the cards, then fair enough. I agree with them, but you cannot ban the cards and state that it is for a good player experience if you are going to promote a client that is currently promoted. And I think almost everyone will agree with me. The PTCGO client is far under par, under what it should be for Pokemon as a company, with how big they are, but also for how developed the game is. The client is buggy, the client is very laggy, there is a lot of missing features, a lot of new games that come out these days have built in them in their alpha stage. Pokemon is fully released and does not have any of these. So, I think whilst it's great that you're banning to help new player experience, help the new players and the existing players by funding your client more and helping and making PTCGO a better game in general. I don't know whether we will do a video on this, but I know me and Joe have written a lot of thoughts about PTCGO to one another in various different places, and it might be a video we end up getting to, but it's one that we feel very strongly about, especially with the channel being so, focused on Pokemon in general. We play PTCGO a lot, and whilst I'm glad this is the first step in making the new player experience better, with Bellelba and Brycen-Man being banned, I like that argument, but follow it up with making the new player experience from a client-side standpoint better as well, because a lot of people won't switch off because they didn't have fun in a game. Because people won't only switch off because they didn't have fun in a game on a ladder. People will switch off because of the lack of features, because of buggy, laggy clients, because of we saw some of the worst bugs of all time this past week. So, in general, whilst it's a step forward, to me it's more of a step sideways, out of the way of the fact that PTCGO needs to be basically overhauled. We need a new PTCGO with new features. We need big updates to PTCGO, new features, updated features, all of that stuff. And I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. I can only assume funding, but I think especially right now when there are no real IRL tournaments, this is going to be the time where the player base is putting the most attention into the online client, so this should be the time you're pushing it and funding it. And kind of a separate issue, one that me and Joe will talk about in another video, I'm sure, but in general, that's how I feel about the whole new player experience thing. Like I say, I think they banned Bellelba and Brycen-Man for the new player experience, and that's a good thing, but also follow it up with making the new player experience good, not from a card game standpoint, but from a gameplay standpoint as well. My suggested changes, very finally, on the ban list, I would love to see updates to the frequency of the ban lists, up to 8 times a year, or at least 4 times, or at least moving them. This is the one final point I have. Ban lists, the way bans are structured right now, the ban list updates are announced 2 weeks before a new set comes out, and in general, I don't think this is a good idea, because the thought process, the reason for making changes to a ban list is to ban cards, is to change the format, and the format is going to change with the introduction of a new set anyway. So it's like making 2 changes. You have a format that's not very healthy, so you're going to change it twice. Well, why not change it once by just having the new cards come out, and if it still needs changing, change it again with an updated frequency of bans, one in the middle of the format as well. there's no reason to, you know, we've seen that a lot of the times these ban announcements go that there's no new cards announced, there's no bans announced, so they're not opposed to just saying no new changes. So if they're not opposed to saying no new changes, why not update the frequency of them at the times you want to ban cards and change the format, because it gives you more flexibility as to when you can do that. So like I say, once 2 weeks before the release, that's fine. I don't particularly like it, but if they wanted to keep that, that's fair enough. I can understand why. But I don't think the 2 weeks before a release is... It feels to me kind of pointless, because why would you ban cards and then have a load of new cards released? Why not have a load of new cards released, see if anything changes, and then ban cards 6 weeks later if nothing has changed. Again, that's just my opinion, and that's something that I really want to express. That's something that I feel the strongest about. I think the philosophy behind banning cards and new cards coming out is identical, so you shouldn't have them line up with one another. Whilst it maybe makes it easier to understand when bans happen, I don't think it necessarily makes it... I think it doesn't need to happen, because it could mean that bans don't need to happen and you're just banning cards for no reason. And if you can get away with banning no cards in your game, you want to ban no cards in your game, in my opinion. You want everything to be as healthy as possible. And, you know, like I say, with Oranguru rotating, we don't know how strong Mill and Control would have been if Bellelba and Brycen-Man would have stayed in the format, but I very, very strongly feel that with Oranguru rotating, they would not have been as strong anyway. So maybe you didn't even have to ban Bellelba and Brycen-Man. Maybe you wanted to anyway, but I don't know why I'm saying you. I don't know who I'm referring to in particular, but maybe the general you. I don't know whether you would want to ban Bellelba and Brycen-Man anyway, because it's not an enjoyable card to play against. But I don't think it would have. You don't think a lot of people would have been playing against it as much, because in general the decks look weaker. So like I say, it's just banning cards 2 weeks before a release date, making ban changes that change when a new set of cards come into effect as well, I don't think is sensible, because I think you're making changes to a format twice, when if you want to change a format, you only need to change it once. I need to think of a better way of wording that, because I want to write that down and express that a bit more. But yeah, hopefully that's relatively understandable. If you're going to ban cards, why would you ban cards when new cards are going to come in and change the format anyway? Why not have these ban updates in the middle of a format, 6 weeks after a set is released, rather than 2 weeks before a set is released, so that you can actually change a format if it's an unhealthy format, so that you don't have 3 months of one really, really bad format. You only ever have 6 weeks of a format that isn't particularly good. But yeah, I would like to see the ban updates. I would like the frequency to go up to 8 times a year. And also, the final point is I just want to express that I think banning reactively, not retroactively, banning reactively is fine based on data, not hypothetically based on data, because hypothetically doesn't really work, because you have to let a format evolve and change, and you have to see what the players want to do, whereas banning reactively, you can see whether an archetype is too strong, too weak, this, that, and the other, and therefore make changes accordingly. So yeah, that was a really long video. The first time, this is the second time I'm recording this. The first time I recorded this, it was only about 30 minutes long, so I don't know how I've gone on for another 20 minutes, but in general, this is a topic I felt really, really strongly about, and I'm glad I got to do a video on it. Hopefully there's lots of chat down below as to what you think of them. If you managed to make it all the way through this video, thank you so much for your support. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. Like I say, these discussion videos really I really enjoy making them, chatting about them, and discussing the aftermath. And it will definitely be interesting to see how Bellelba and Brycen-Man going changes the format. This is what I mean, though. We don't know how strong it would have been if it had stayed in format. So whilst I'm saying it'll be interesting to see what it's like without it, we don't know what it would have been like with it. And I don't think it would have been particularly different with it, because Bellelba and Brycen-Man I don't think is a particularly strong card going into next format. Nor Mismagius. I think Mismagius did nothing wrong. But yeah, it is what it is. It's just my opinion. I'm sure you guys will agree with me, disagree with me down below. So make sure you do. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from OmniPoke. Make sure you stay tuned for lots of new Darkness Ablaze deck analysis videos from Joe and myself on the channel. And other than that, like I say, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video.